Greetings, friends. I'm your host, Christopher O'Reilly, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to Over the Top, my new podcast celebrating the performances and life stories of musical friends, old and new. I'm so honored to reunite today with Kang Min Shin, a brilliant classical guitarist I heard in 2016 when Kang Min was just 17. He had recently won a Young Artists competition sponsored by the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, collaborating with countertenor Benjamin Wenzelberg. They'd been friends since 8th grade. Here's a slice from Can She Excuse My Wrongs by John Dowland. This is Benjamin Wenzelberg and our guest, Kang Min Shin.
Can she excuse my wrongs with virtue's cloak? Shall I call her good when she proves unkind? Are those clear fires which vanish into smoke? Must I praise the leaves when no fruit I find? No, where shadows do for bodies stand. Thou mayst be abused if thy sight be dim. Could thou be like to words written on the sand, or to bubbles which on the water swim? Wilt thou be thus abused still, seeing that she will right thee never, if thou canst not forego her, thy love will be thus fruitless ever.
So beautiful, Kang Min. I remember Benji remarking back then that even though he had the text in his part, he always felt as though he could hear the text in your own playing. It's a wonderful way of expressing the kind of dedication and deep concentration that all who hear you become instantly aware of and inspired by. Tell us, Kang Min, of how you started on guitar and the unlikely path that led you to concentrate on playing at such an early age.
Yeah, there's been a whole lot of events, starting from when I was very young, but I really started learning classical guitar around when I was around 9 or 10, more of a hobby thanks to my dad, who was also a classical guitar enthusiast. He mostly started teaching me so that I'll be able to play these very popular pieces like Romance and Recuerdos de la Alhambra that I could use in social occasions mostly. And so I've mostly only been practicing only around 30 minutes a day on average back then. But then came the day when I had to start thinking of where to go to middle school. And my parents found out about this national youth guitar competition in Korea, which they thought I could participate in since they offered participation awards, even if I just showed up. We had very low expectations back then. And I only knew how to play 3 solo pieces, Alhambra, Romance, and Una Limosna por el Amor de Dios, but the last of which I actually decided to enter the competition with. However, somehow, by a stroke of luck, I ended up tying in first place with another child that was aspiring to be a professional classical guitarist, only receiving the second prize because I was a year older than the competitor in the first place. And it was a remarkable result, so I literally no one, not myself, not my parents, not anyone expected it. And so I suddenly started receiving attention from the classical guitar teachers in Korea who were trying to persuade my parents to join a musical conservatory. But the problem was that in Korea, the education system worked so that I had to essentially decide what I wanted to become immediately when I entered middle school. If I decided to pick a musical path back then, I would have to give up on all of my other aspirations and studies, while if I picked academics, it would be very difficult at best for me to ever pursue music, because neither myself nor my parents ever wanted to tie down our futures just like that. We wanted to look for other options, and we found it when one of my parents' emails looking for advice in foreign countries, along with the video of my performance during the Korean National Youth Guitar Competition, reached my Juilliard pre-college faculty, Tali Roth. To our ever-growing surprise, she actually suggested a special audition for me on August 2011 after going over the entire email for 3 days. And miraculously, I actually made it after learning 2 more pieces. Literally, I only knew how to play just 5 pieces in total when I was accepted, and really it was kind of a miracle And my humble audition performance managed to impress Tali and Kaplinsky, who was then the head of the pre-college.
Yes, Veda is a very good old friend, and Tali just such a wonderful teacher and wonderful human being. Let's hear a piece that you've been playing ever since you started. This is El Ultimo Tremolo, una limosna por el amor del Dios, composed by Augustin Barrios Mangore. We heard El Ultimo Tremolo, composed by Augustin Barrios, played by our guest for today, Kang Min Shin. It's so gorgeous, Kang Min, and I just there's such intelligence about your playing. There's so much about classical guitar that reminds me so much of the piano, that there are so many different kinds of articulations. I know you were now in New York on Saturdays at Juilliard Pre-College, thanks to Tali Roth and Veda Kaplinsky, who runs Juilliard Prep. Tell us about, all the things that you did there in that one day, in addition to your lessons with Tali.
Basically, it was not just about guitar when I went to the Juilliard Pre-College. Obviously, there were like ensembles and also lessons for my solo pieces. But there were also moments when I went through ear training as well as musical theory, and I definitely started falling in love with musical theory because like with all these studies in musical theory, I was now able to actually learn what music is made of, all these structures inside. And it really kind of interested me. My other interests happen to be in science, and in terms of like music, I felt like musical theory was kind of like a science in terms of music so that I can actually study what makes up the entire like composition of music and like what makes a piece of music sound really good. For example, like the Una Limosna that I just played, like now I can actually understand what kind of harmonics and what kind of musical articulations and tools actually make it sound the way it does. So I definitely loved studying ear training and musical theory as well. And I also definitely loved the choir because in the middle school choir version, I actually was able to do Vivaldi's Gloria. And also for the high school, I was able to do like the Laudamus Te or Mozart's Requiem. So I definitely loved all of those pieces passionately when I did them, tenor or bass range. So I definitely loved all of these other side experiences I had in the pre-college as well.
And they lend such an intelligence, just an innate intelligence to your playing. In addition to that, I know you won in 2013. You won a competition, and so that was basic. What competition was that we're talking about? 2013.
It was the Guitar Foundation of America, like international youth competition. Mm-hmm. It might have been actually where the like Una Limosna video came from. And it was where I performed Cataluña and Invocación in Daza as well as Una Limosna on stage.
Yeah.
And it was definitely like an epic moment. I guess because absolutely. It was like the first international competition that I actually like received a prize for in terms of guitar.
We're going to hear the Cataluña in a bit, but after that competition, it was after that you started playing chamber music with your friend James Yang, the violinist.
Yep, indeed. The chamber music experience really kind of blossomed when I entered high school chamber music club because, it's kind of actually funny because I've been trying to practice VWV 1033 with another student who was playing the flute, but James kind of just barged into our practice room and he was very intently listening to how we were practicing, and then he actually suggested for us to do a duo instead. And it was a very interesting moment, and I actually never expected back then it would blossom into such a wonderful collaboration. And we actually first started with a relatively calm short piece by Paganini called Cantabile, and then we started playing at all the nursing homes, the school events, and the local library with pieces like Fugue's Melodie or Piazzolla's History of Tango. And the game changer really came when we decided to try out the Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society concert with a piece called Sonata Concertata, as it was the performance that actually first led me and James to be featured on From the Top as well.
Well, we're going to hear that very familiar Gluck melody in one of the house concerts that you performed with violinist James Yang. Gluck's Melodie, played by our guest Kang Min Shin, with James Yang violin. Such a gorgeous piece, and so beautifully played. So, Kang Min, you were playing chamber music with James Yang, and then also with Benjamin Wenzelberg, with whom we started the program. And so, and as I mentioned, you and Benjamin were friends since 8th grade, and so your new interest in chamber music, it was really quite an inspiration for you.
The thing about James was actually less expected even than with my collaboration with Benjamin, because I actually didn't even like the violin before I started my collaboration with him, because it was so high pitched, and when I actually tried to play violin, it often sounded really scratchy, so I actually had the negative bias towards the instrument. But when I actually heard James playing, as with the piece that you just played a moment ago, it definitely kind of rang out to me that violin isn't what I think it is, and it's definitely capable of singing just like a voice or even like guitar as well. And it definitely changed my outview of what the violin can do. And it was a little bit less so with Benjamin, because I knew that the voice actually could work very great with guitar, but for him the surprise was something else, because I always knew that Benjamin Perry Wenzelberg was really an amazing person in general, not just as a boy soprano countertenor, but when he collaborated with me, but also as a phenomenal composer and conductor, which he's also still doing at this moment. I always loved how much he truly appreciated and understood about music, and it really showed when he tried to sing pieces that we did together, like Dowland, Can She Excuse, and Come Heavy Sleep together at the Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society as well. We actually appeared in Lincoln Center twice, once with the aforementioned Dowland in 2016, and then again with Schubert's Frühlingslaub and Achtung Träume in 2017. And each time I just really loved how his voice was able to capture these subtle emotions and delicate words in those pieces, because unlike with violin, all those words and the way he sings it is definitely something only the voice can do, and I was glad I could play a part in helping them come to fruition through my own accompaniments.
And then you've been interested in two main pursuits, in your own words, ever since I was young. I think the two words that could best summarize me are curiosity and an innate desire for communicating with the world. I don't know which came first, my love of books or my desire to learn new things and imagine. Let's hear you describe so eloquently in your own words your dual track from early childhood.
Basically, ever since I was young, I definitely had a whole lot of brimming curiosity about the world, as well as an innate desire to communicate with the world. I think they both go hand in hand. And I think I always had a bit of a scientific analytic streak in me, because that kind of comes with all the curiosity I have, as well as my desire to communicate with the world, because after all, communication, I think, comes with understanding the world, and I believed that science really provided me with the tools to do it. Even when I studied music in pre-college, as I mentioned before, I was instantly drawn to the structure of harmony in music theory, because it opened my eyes to the mechanics behind what was vaguely aesthetically lovely to my ears. And that's kind of why I also developed a burning curiosity in biology even before entering elementary school. I guess at the start it may have been just like everyone else, memorizing the types and traits of every dinosaur and shark, like an average boy, I guess. I actually still do remember quite a bit, actually, so if you quiz me on them, I could probably answer them.
Dinosaurs, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, dinosaurs. But as I started reading Newton's, all of that curiosity really bloomed into a more in-depth desire to explore things like how DNA, genes, and proteins work, and the mechanisms behind a lot of the processes involved in life we take for granted. Like, for example, since I'm majoring in medicine at this moment, right now, when I was studying in psychiatry, I was able to see how things like SSRIs or drugs like that could even affect how emotions change in our minds, and that definitely interested me ever since I was young. And I also really loved casually reading some of the huge medical textbooks that were lying around the house, thanks to my dad being a family physician, which in retrospect turned out to be a bit of a spoiler alert since I'm studying medicine now. But I wasn't always that way because early on my interest was almost completely in terms of pure biology, with medicine only as a side note. So although my special edition offer from pre-college was a major turning point for me in music as well, it was actually a great opportunity as well in terms of academics as well, because again in South Korea, if I decided to pursue music, I would never have been able to actually pursue all of my aspirations in academics. But in the US, I was able to do that through the dual program of having the Juilliard pre-college on Saturdays, as well as on the weekdays when I could actually study in the public schools at Tenafly NJ. And the great thing about the public schools in Tenafly was that in South Korea, I never actually got to ask all of the questions I had as much as I wanted, because then I'd actually be bullied as a know-it-all, and I really felt stifled in the environment because, there was only competition. It only valued what I got in an exam instead of all of what I'm curious about. The thing I definitely loved about the teachers in Tenafly was that they really allowed me to ask questions and discuss in depth about all the things I was interested in and all these things I was interested in, and it really allowed me to break out of my formerly shy and locked-in self and truly pursue all my interests to their limits. So of course, since I arrived in 7th grade, it took me a bit of adjusting, but after that I really started to kind of burgeon, especially since I entered high school. Because thanks to the biology club, I was able to annually try out the USA Biology Olympiad and the Toronto International Biology Competition to test my understanding in biology. And it was never really about getting or achieving some medal or whatever, even though I still did make it into the semifinals for the USABO and top 5% in the Toronto Biology Competition. Those awards were not what mattered, but the challenge itself was what truly rang out to me, because I could, even if the semifinal status is the same, I could always try further and further by deepening my understanding. And I could also use it to champion for our school's biology department for the New Jersey Science League as well. So there was also a sense of camaraderie as well.
Yes, and pride. I want to go back to another one of your competition wins. This is one of the pieces that you played quite famously at that last musical competition. Just so amazing to hear all of your scientific accomplishments, even in high school. We're going to hear now Albeniz's Cataluña. our guest Kang Min Shin performing Isaac Albeniz's Cataluña. Just reminds me every time I hear you play Kang Min, the idea that and as you speak in terms of science and in terms of music, there's such a sense not only of the events, the notes themselves, but the relationship between the notes and your innate knowledge of the structure of the piece, and something that you think of, first of all, in terms of a Russian pedagogical idea of intonation, not just playing in tune, but the idea of projecting the truth of an interval, a very close half step, as opposed to a real palpable leap of a sixth or something. And that's something that can be lost if we're too worried about just remembering all the facts of the playing. And it's something that you really project so beautifully and innately in all of your performances, and I just think it's remarkable.
I mean, it's really thanks to the fact that like I really treat the music the same way I treat any kind of science or everything. Yeah. So basically, like the earlier curiosity and the innate desire for communicating with the world applies to music as well. And for instance, when like I'm playing in Cataluña, there's a part in the middle where the bass part actually resurfaces as a sort of the like melodic part. And it's definitely an interesting part because in the parts above, there's like a very like almost a bit of a frantic dance going on top, like the but like in the bass parts there's a whole like a very grounded melody that's actually coming from the very beginning of the piece. So actually learning music theory and everything like really kind of ties into how I approach the piece and understand the piece. And at the same time there's also the innate aspect of like listening to the notes and trying to understand what the notes represent and trying to portray them and share them with the rest of the world. And it really comes down to like its connection with my studies, because if I never really studied about like the history of Spain, for instance, as well as what Cataluña even represents in terms of like Barcelona and everything, it never would have actually been portrayed in the piece. So it all really connects together. It's not like separated at all. I believe, at least that's my belief.
It wouldn't be possible without your innate curiosity about how things work and why things work. I mean, it's one thing to just say, "Oh, it's such a beautiful piece, I want to play it," but it's another thing altogether to know everything that it contributes.
All the components.
Yes, all the components. What the composer is trying to convey, what the sociological aspect of the time and place contribute to the piece. I loved what you were saying about your school experience in the U.S. compared to your school experience in Korea, that you were actually allowed to be a nerd.
Oh,
And you were actually appreciated and celebrated for it. Share that.
When I was trying out all these biology Olympiads, for instance, I didn't really like do practice problems and stuff. I mostly kept reading the Campbell AP biology textbook and science magazines for fun. And in the US, that was actually okay because there were actually like-minded people, both in like terms of biology and like when I'm studying in class as well. And I was really allowed to be the nerd that I always wanted to be and like explore all my curiosities to their limits, as well as ask all the questions. And I wouldn't be treated as weird even if I, for example, like actually liked the anatomy classes, for instance. In terms of anatomy, I actually did this in like around 9th grade or 10th grade where I actually did the biology courses, and I was able to do like fetal pig as well as the cat dissection anatomies, but like it wasn't just about like a morbid curiosity, but it was more about like actually learning about what kind of structures actually bring these organisms to life. And it's really the same even now, like in the medical anatomy classes. The more I dive deeper into the structures of organs of the cadaver laying before me, as well as when I actually held the once beating heart of the person who had donated the body, I actually felt a closer connection with the person than what the simple rites of like mourning in the beginning gave me, because now the person has actually allowed me to learn more and revealed more
Wow.
intimate things about himself. All of these like pursuits and practices, they were actually allowed in the US. They were actually allowed to blossom because, for example, there was a class called Science Research in 10th grade, and through the class, I was able to learn what research is actually about, as well as getting to design my own research topics and experiences, which would be an opportunity that South Korea would not have been able to afford me, actually. So one of the fun experiments I actually did was trying to assess the level of sulfur dioxide pollution in the New York City Central Park by genetically analyzing the lichen species living there, after discovering that the distribution of lichen species in general is very dependent on sulfur dioxide levels due to their sensitivity to acid rain. So, like, when I come up with these ideas, for instance, I might be mocked and scorned in Korea for being a total nerd, but like in America, there were actually like-minded teammates who were willing to take this idea seriously. And
Yeah.
actually, like when I came up with the idea and spearheaded the research, they really followed along very well. Really, it was thanks to their efforts that I was able to be listed as the co-author of the Siemens Research Competition semifinalist paper, even though I could not actually be qualified as an awardee due to my lack of citizenship at the point. And the paper also got published in the International Barcode of Life, as well as the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So it was definitely a major moment for me, since it also allowed me and my teammates an interview from the North Sturgeon newspaper. The fact that I'm still a nerd really shows in the fact that I still reminisce to those days and happily think of all the improvements I could make to the research if I could go back in time and do it again. And it's really a common factor for music as well, since even as I'm listening to pieces like Cataluña or Una I had played before, I always think of new things that I could now perhaps implement as a more grown person, and like perhaps listen to the inner voices a little bit more, and all those really kind of ties into the innate curiosity, I think.
Speaking of which, let's listen to the master of musical DNA. We're going to hear you now play from Johann Sebastian Bach, the Fugue from the Lute Suite in C minor, BWV 987.
Yep, tuned to 415, I think.
Good
instead
for you,
of the
man.
usual 440.
Absolutely. extraordinary performance by our guest, Kang Min Shin, the Bach Fugue from the Lute Suite in C minor, BWV 997. Just extraordinary. Tell me, let's pick up where we left off about that research achievement in the lichen, that with the lichen in Central Park about acid rain, etc. It gained you the opportunity to allow you the observership with Dr. Amaya.
Basically, because the earlier lichen research was such a success, it actually landed me an opportunity of observership with Dr. Amaya Lujambio at the Mount Sinai Icahn School of Medicine. Although, again, my citizen status did not allow me to become a full intern there. This was the moment that slowly kind of began opening my eyes to research medicine as a field as well, because, as I previously mentioned, I'd mostly been interested in the pure biology side of things up to that point, but seeing her actually doing research and myself engaging in a bioinformatics analysis of the relationships of key genes involved in liver cancer, I was awakened to the possibility of actually directing my scientific interests to come up with things that could help people in need, especially since there are a lot of hepatitis B carriers still in South Korea, and it's a major risk factor of liver cancer. Yeah. I also got to learn a lot about the R programming language and structuring my research properly, as well as methods of statistical analysis, which would greatly help me again later, because I would definitely be continuing on that path as well.
Right. We're going to hear just one more, another favorite from childhood. We're now going to hear Kang Min Shin performing Francisco Tarrega, Recuerdos de la Alhambra, and then we'll get back to hear about your wonderful research studies. they just can't help themselves, Kang Min, and I'm coming to know a pattern in your performance that the narrative of the piece ends, which is where everybody starts clapping all of a sudden. But you have a separate way of making the curtain come down after the play has finished.
Sort of a zen, I guess.
Yes, exactly. So it's really weird. It's very idiosyncratic to you, and hopefully people will catch on. They won't interrupt you.
I think they are catching on. I really appreciate the selection of pieces that you decided to feature for this interview, because there are many, but especially the pieces that you picked, I really feel they exemplify different aspects of me, because earlier the Fugue by Bach definitely exemplified my innate desire to learn more about structure as well as exploring different possibilities.
Yes.
So for me, Bach, the more I listen to it and play it, it's kind of almost like mathematics in a way, because it's like this one melody, da 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 da. This melody just kind of starts and then it really develops into its own thing. It's kind of like in mathematics, it would be equivalent to a Mandelbrot set or a logistic map, where a simple pattern really develops into something much more complex as it keeps on going. And I think the reason I love Bach especially really kind of ties into that innate sort of reason, the same reason that I keep on being interested in research biology as well as science. And the Recuerdos de la Alhambra that you played for me just before, it actually ties into a different aspect of me that really kind of ties into why I decided to pursue medicine ultimately. When I held the heart of the cadaver that had donated the body, I actually felt a closer connection with the person than simple rites of mourning could offer me, because I get to learn more about the person through the entire cadaver anatomy class, as well as seeing all the different structures inside him. It was an entirely different experience as well, doing clinical rounds starting from my 5th year, because in Korea the medical school lasts for 6 years, and I'm currently in my 6th year, by the way. I hope this is gonna be my last year, but all those things are kind of going on right now. So as I'm doing all these clinical rounds, I've encountered all of these patients and actually spoke with them, which kind of reminded me of when I actually had performed in the elderly nursing homes back in Cresskill and Tenafly, which was actually where that entire video of the Recuerdos de la Alhambra comes from. So I was actually playing back then for the Cresskill nursing home, if I remember correctly, and I definitely loved their kindly smiles and the very delicious cookies they gave me as well. But so the reason the patients I met reminded me of those people is that even the smallest attention sometimes, giving the patients a smile, asking them questions, being attentive to their needs, really help them kind of cope with their disease-worn bodies and their weary minds in a way. And I really saw the power that my words can have on people, as well as the gravity, as well as the amount of power that my profession gives me. Seeing the patients firsthand really allowed me to understand that it's not just a disease, it's not just a patient having a stroke or a patient with a heart attack or whatever staring me at the face, but all these patients with all their myriad stories behind a simple label of illness. I think that's part of what keeps on inspiring me to keep studying medicine, because through the study of medicine I actually get to not only engage the world in terms of my innate curiosity, but also in terms of communicating with all these different types of people, as well as learning more about why the world might be this particular way or everything like that. And it kind of helps because it's not just about learning a simple disease. It's also about learning their lifestyles as well. For example, for a person who's had a heart attack, it's not just about using the right kinds of medications, but learning why the person was smoking in the first place, or why the person had like an addiction to alcohol, and all those
Right.
things actually ties into the need for communication as well
Yeah.
as the need for comfort, which I think music really offers me. I actually have my times of need as well when I feel after like all these clinical rounds and seeing really patients like who are bedridden or really morbid at that point. Sometimes I need to find solace in those moments. And I think music, even though it's not my major at this moment and medicine is, it still provides me with that sort of comfort that I
Well,
can actually resort to when
there's
I,
just a wonderful
yeah.
perspective, Kang Min, because as you're dealing and you're speaking now of symptoms and
Yeah,
illnesses, but as we're we're dealing with in music, compositions, we're also using our overall perspective, our lessons in ear training, and
yeah,
your vast knowledge of languages. So we're
yeah,
dealing with a holistic situation where we're
yeah,
dealing with the whole patient and the whole making a perspective, a prognosis about all of this, and you're
yeah,
expanding on all of that in all of these times.
yeah. The more I seem to grow, like the more it seems like I see things more in terms of a holistic lens, both
Yeah.
in terms like music, whether
Hmm.
like for example, as I mentioned, Bach might turn like tie into like a mathematical graph or Mandelbrot set, and at
Yes.
the same time, like oh, like my attitudes towards music can also kind of reflect like inside how I treat patients or like
Hmm.
interacted with them as well as how I study like and even in terms of my academic studies as well like because for example like one of the earlier researches I was able to do in medical school was basically a research on in terms of diabetes. It was a paper
Yes.
titled The Effects of Advanced Glycation End Products on the Expression of RAGEs and VEGFs in raw 264.7 macrophages. Like the technical details don't matter so much, but like I was inspired to do this research because of the apparent paradox of abnormal increase in angiogenesis in diabetic patients with retinopathy or cancers versus their poor wound healing procedures, which would
Hmm.
actually imply a defect in angiogenesis in the skin. So it could only have come to pass if because of my attentiveness in the medical classes and actually being attentive to what illnesses that diabetic patients like the complications that they go through like without learning all of those I could not have actually come up with this kind of research on my own.
Absolutely.
And so basically like even in designing a research like this I think my attitude towards patients as well as all my outlook on life in general really kind of blends in together.
Yes.
And
Yes.
like this paper actually like is currently in Korean, save the abstract due to submission requirements and stuff, but I plan on translating it into English soon. And
Hmm.
all the graphs and pictures were also personally made through programs and stuff. And even at present, I'm actually working on a review journal on kinesins and human pathologies and their linkages together, which I'm planning to submit to an
Oh, excellent.
SCI level journal if I manage to successfully complete it. So I'm
Absolutely.
definitely still working on the dream of research medicine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, all of my experiences in clinical rounds is kind of conflicting me in terms of my major because like I'm still debating on whether I should go into actually treat patients versus like whether I should actually
Research.
just go fully into research and like
Yeah.
studies of pathology and stuff. And
Yes.
it's really kind of like an ongoing debate in my mind, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. An epic life in progress.
I
Before
guess
we say
so if
goodbye
you
to our
call.
honored guest, physician and guitarist Kang Min Shin, let's hear one more of his extraordinary performances. We're going to hear Manuel Ponce, the Sonata Number 3, the Allegro Moderato movement. Manuel Ponce, Sonata Number 3. We heard the Allegro Moderato movement performed by our wonderful guest, Kang Min Shin. Kang Min, you are as brilliant a writer as you are a research scientist and guitarist. You shared with me some of your creative writing, which runs the gamut of the fantastical and confessional, exploring darkness and light in every moment. Do you have plans to publish your written work or share it online?
You know, I actually have some plans, but I'll have to look into like new avenues in order to do it. Yeah. But I'm glad you mentioned it. And
just voluminous and very so creative and so fantastical. Yeah.
I think everything really is kind of connected. All the languages I got the opportunity to learn, like Korean, English, Chinese, and a bit of French and Japanese that I actually aim to expand on subsequent years if I get the chance. All of those things kind of tie into my experimentations with languages as well, which is kind of what kickstarted all of the writings that I've done in the first place, all the creating and like creative endeavors. And the thing about writing is that like when I'm writing something, I keep trying to explore the things that I can't actually express in terms of writing. So like I'm trying to find a way to express things through the pauses in terms of music, the silences. Amazing. And I think like it really kind of ties into the whole show, don't tell aspect of writing. And like as I'm like experimenting with writing as well, I think it kind of also ties into like what I do with music as well. Because in terms of music, you can't really see colors and a painting when you're doing music. But at the same time, whenever I do a piece like Manuel Ponce's Sonata Number 3, I always picture like some sort of painting where there are different sceneries and different watermark colors, as well as oil paintings. So it kind of really seems to tie into the way I play the piece as well as how I color the piece. At this point, I'd really like to thank my parents especially for allowing me to develop all of these curiosities and all my sensitivities as well, because really like it's thanks to their great efforts that I was able to pursue all of my dreams up to now. And I'm especially thankful that they like nurtured my sensitivity, because after all, I think both in terms of writing or music or even in terms of like science research, I think there like really needs to be something to be curious about or something to portray in order to actually do it, because otherwise it's really a meaningless gesture. So for other musical people who are aspiring to be musicians as well as like doing it as a hobby, I would kind of like to suggest experiencing a lot of things in life, because it's definitely different having experienced like certain things compared to not having experienced them, like as for example like love or the kind of sadness you might feel when you look out of the window on a very dark night and look below to see the abyss greeting you from below, like, and all of those sensitivities like definitely tie into how you play music or how you approach life in general in every way.
So our experience,
yeah, definitely. I think I would suggest to embiggen, although I know that embiggen isn't a real world, but I would still like the message still holds that I would love people to like broaden their experiences and also be sensitive to all the different experiences in general, because it's very different, like just looking at the sun and saying, oh yeah, it's just a normal sunny day, versus, oh, the warm breeze is caressing my cheeks so softly, and the soft wind is almost whispering in my ear. Like those kinds of things are like being sensitive to the minute details in each experiences would definitely help enrich the kinds of music that you do, as well as the kinds of writing or kinds of anything really that you do, in my opinion. So I definitely kind of leave that as a note to the world, I guess.
Very, very eloquently said, to broaden our experience of every moment, to really make every moment an enriched, an informed one. I'm so in awe of all of your accomplishments and so excited about what's to come in your young, brilliant life. Kang Min, sharing it with us. So appreciate
I'm definitely honored that you decided to feature me here in the first place.
Such a pleasure.
Because I really consider myself to be like humble, like small creature crawling through like the eddies of life. And I'm just honored that you appreciate me so much.
Well, you're an inspiration to us all, Kang Min. I'm
No
so
problem.
thrilled we got to speak. And so everybody can see what performances you have, and those are performances yet to come. They go to Kang Min Shin at YouTube. On YouTube would be a good place.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Kang Min. We're so grateful to you, and all the best. And I hope we get to hear from you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well, Mr.
Thank you.
O'Reilly.
Thank you. And thank you, Over the Top listeners, for joining me today. Also, special thanks to Joel Dallow, host of the Cello Sherpa podcast, for the encouragement and expertise I needed to take my own show into the podcast realm. I hope you'll join me again soon for Over the Top.